Mulligan, and with me is Victoria Abbott. We are here to do a Celebrity Stories Year in Review. So, Tori, why don't you kick us off?
So unfortunately, there were quite a few divorces this year. In fact, I don't know if you've seen that running joke where they like pop up on your Instagram and it's like, who's it going to be now? Who's separated? So unfortunately, there's been a lot of those this year.
Or it's like you're on Twitter and you see a name trending and you're
like, oh no. Is it one of my favorite celebrity couples?
No, please.
And I have a few of my favorites who are in here, unfortunately, but one of which is Hugh Jackman and Deborah Lee Jackman, who were married for 27 years and recently separated. I don't think they're actually divorced yet. We actually just spoke about them on podcasts prior to, and I know you've also spoken about them on a prior podcast.
It is sad.
Yeah.
We did talk about them a little bit briefly when this happened. Not a lot of details have come out, but there are, things to consider if they were filing in California, as some people kindly pointed out online when I did my video. They're in Australia, so it doesn't apply. We are talking
we're only pretending they live here in California.
Yes, we are just using these celebrities as a means to explain what goes on in California. So 27 years, that's
long-term marriage.
Let's
touch on spousal support, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we've talked about spousal support a little bit as it relates to celebrity divorces, but long-term marriages, the court can retain jurisdiction, which means
forever.
Yeah, forever. Essentially, they can make orders for spousal support. Often parties will waive that.
Right. They'll do something. They don't want to keep coming back to court on this.
Exactly.
It's interesting, but I understand the sentiment. 27 years is a long time. He, has done great things in his career, and I'm not taking any of that away from him. But they do have, I think they have one child. They may have two. They may have more, but they've had children or a child. And she was a makeup artist. That's how they met. Presumably she's had to put that career a bit on the back burner so Hugh Jackman can do his Hugh Jackman things that we all like.
The Greatest Showman.
Exactly, The Greatest Showman, Wolverine. And so the idea behind spousal support, especially for a long-term marriage, is to recognize that
one
contribution.
Partner, might have been making sacrifices to support the other.
Correct. And imagine that they didn't. And now you have Hugh Jackman, who, he's going to star in Deadpool 3.
Yeah.
He's set up. He doesn't have to worry about that. And not that Hugh, like I know him, would do this, but assume he's not the nicest guy and he just gives nothing to her. Mm-hmm. She's really at a disadvantage in life, which is what spousal support is supposed to help accommodate for.
Yeah, Dawn has said something on a podcast before, not this particular series, but thinking of spousal support as a property right. And I really like that because I think especially when children are involved, right, there is sometimes a party who's putting their career on pause to help raise the children. Not always, of course. And so I just think that this misconception around spousal support that it kind of has a dirty connotation.
I agree.
But it's really a property right, especially when we look at it in terms of California law.
David, you may have to cut this, but nothing grinds my gears more than people saying, they should just walk away. They're not entitled to his or her money, and often it is his money. And often it was the wife who stayed home with the children, and the wife who would be disadvantaged. And I like the idea of thinking of it as a property right, because some people look at it sort of as a handout, and it really is not at all.
It's not intended to be, right? And there's certain measures in the law that obviously curb that impact of it being a handout, right? Because the spouse who's receiving support, the ultimate intention is that they're going to become self-supporting over a certain amount of time, right? And so the law takes into consideration it's twofold, right? It's not just you do get spousal support indefinitely. The law is saying this is really intended to help you get on your feet, to become self-supporting, and we recognize that in a marriage, sometimes one person is pursuing a career while someone's home, there's so many factors that come into spousal support.
Right. And I think spousal support is really interesting, and it's definitely more interesting to argue about in court versus child support, which is
guideline fixed,
straight formula based on your income. Your income goes up, support changes. Whereas with permanent spousal support, so not that temporary spousal support, they are looking at the marital standard of living. And so, for example, if let's say you separate and then you get this great job and you're making a ton of money, maybe you're going to have to pay a little bit more in temporary spousal support to get them on their feet and not put them at a disadvantage in the dissolution. But that's not supposed to be what's looked at for that long-term spousal support.
Right.
You know, look at what your life was like while married, and that's what's going to determine what you are, you would be entitled to.
Right.
It's very interesting.
It is interesting. But again, they're not, they
They're-
don't live
they
in
aren't doing-
California and they're not divorced, but we're just using them as a little
jumping off point.
Yes.
Thank you to both.
The next one is Jeannie Mai and Jeezy.
Yes, and I can say it right.
Now she knows how to say her name.
Jeezy, I apologize again. You told me something very interesting about this case, which I think came out pretty recently. I wasn't aware of this.
I haven't been following very closely, but I did see that they had a prenup, and one of the terms of their prenup was that if there was any infidelity, and I don't know the specifics, but essentially infidelity would impact the division of assets.
Right.
And I believe she was alluding to some infidelity in her moving papers. So he filed, but when she filed a response, she had, through her attorney, kind of indicated that there was some infidelity.
Which is interesting because in California, infidelity really doesn't play a role in a dissolution.
Yeah, because of non-fault state status. Yeah.
Right. And I recently learned about fault states. So to be clear, every state in the U.S. has the no-fault option, and then certain states have a fault option.
Opt in.
Right. California does not have that, period. I think ultimately it's probably for the best. It probably keeps litigation costs down. And I think it also, this isn't me just loving my California, but I think it helps keep the temperatures of a dissolution lower than they would be otherwise.
I agree.
And they're already pretty high.
I agree, especially with what you're saying with litigation, right? Because that's very much so
fact dependent.
Yeah, very much so. The other thing I read about this is that he's seeking joint legal custody, which I thought was interesting because I didn't see he was seeking joint physical custody, and I thought maybe we could talk about the distinction between the two in California at least. I'm assuming he's probably actually going for both, as most parents are, but go ahead.
Surprisingly, so I kind of had that, I would have thought that too, but I have a case where the father is going to be deployed.
I see.
And so he still has joint legal custody because he will be able to communicate, but they did give mom sole legal custody.
Physical?
I'm sorry, yes.
Oh, okay.
Sole physical custody because he's going to be gone. And they have visitation for him. So maybe in this case, he recognizes that he's going to be traveling a lot.
Yeah.
And so he's okay with it. I'm not sure. Maybe it was a mistake.
This might have just been the article only touching on one. What I think might have happened, and again, I don't know the details, is someone was writing the article and maybe is inflating joint legal custody and joint physical custody, which happens all the time. And just to give like a little overview, is legal custody is obviously decision-making for the child. Physical custody is timeshare with the child. Often parties are seeking joint, or in more contentious situations or certain situations where the circumstances warrant, you'll see someone seeking sole.
Have you found, have you ever had a court order sole legal custody to one parent?
Only in a DV situation.
Right.
Never without a DV.
No, it's a very, very high bar because, of course, things can make it so that you can't spend as much time, but the courts are still going to give you that opportunity to make these big decisions. Another thing I wanted to touch on, and only because I had a client come to me and she had been told by her ex, basically, if I'm going to get joint legal custody and I'm going to tell you when you can go to the park, when you can leave your house. Yeah. And she was terrified of this. And she was really pushing me to ask for sole legal custody. Yeah. And I said, it's very rare for that to be ordered. What's your concern? And she laid this out for me, and I said, don't worry. That's not what it is.
It's not about parks.
No, it's the major decisions where they're going to school. Medical decision making, religion,
decisions,
things like that. These big things that the court, and I think for the most part, rightly thinks both parents should be involved in.
Yeah, there are some complications as it plays out. Sometimes, I'm sure you've seen this with clients, right? It's unclear sometimes what falls under that umbrella of big decisions. You do see that happen, but ultimately I think the court is inclined to order joint legal and in my opinion, joint physical as well. Yeah.
Another thing we should mention is that having joint physical custody doesn't mean you're going to have exactly 50-50%.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's something that I think is not as commonly known. You can have joint physical custody and have alternating weekends to one parent and all other times with the other.
Yes.
So that's that's interesting and not something people know.
Yeah, I think often people think that if it's a scenario like that one person actually has primary custody or sole physical custody, and that's often not the case. It's usually joint, which allows the parties, by the way, to modify custody more. My understanding is more easily, right? If it's just a joint order.
Right.
So that's that one.
That's a good
I think
one.
we touched on everything we could for that. That, by the way, that divorce was a surprise to me because she was married to somebody else for years and years and years.
Very well.
So she was a talk host on a show called The Real, and then she was married to someone for many, many years. They didn't have children together. She didn't want children in that marriage, and then she married Jeezy, and they ended up having, obviously, it was a 2.5-year marriage relationship, and then they had their daughter, who's absolutely adorable. And anyways, it just was surprising that they separated.
I was a little bit surprised, even though I don't follow them, because, when I hear their names, it seemed like they were just this like very cute couple together, and then it seemed like it kind of came out of nowhere, which is sad.
They had a really pretty wedding, and it's just, just for us, I mean, we don't do this in a job, but it's still sad for us when we see people separate, and particularly, we also speculate about celebrity couples, and I was surprised that they separated, but apparently allegedly there's reasons. So, and there always is.
We never know everything.
Exactly. Ariana Grande and Dalton Gomez are another couple that separated, divorced.
Yes.
I don't know where they filed, so I'll disclaimer. I actually don't know anything about this situation.
I can speak on this one a lot. We did a podcast on it, and for all the hoopla that happened when they first separated, there were some allegations of cheating.
Oh, okay.
They very quietly settled this divorce.
Yeah.
He's getting part of the property, some art. It was
Was it filed here? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was LA.
Do they have a prenup? Do you know?
I think they did have a prenup, but
I would imagine.
It seemed like she probably gave him a little bit more just to kind of
and that's kind
of keep things, like I said, the temperatures can be lowered, and she needed that. She needed that to happen.
I actually was surprised we didn't hear more about this in the media. I didn't even realize really that A, she got married, and B, that she divorced.
Well, I actually think her they filed the judgment before 6 months had elapsed. So
I have a case that we're about to do that. Yeah, but they had to still wait the cool-off period.
They still have to wait the cool-off period, but that's how quickly she was able to.
That almost never happens. No. I know when people come to us and say, I just did a consultation, or just was speaking with a client about this in the 6-month cool-off period, and like it typically takes about that time to kind of do everything anyways, right? Between the financial disclosures, drafting, the negotiations, even the most amicable of parties, it can kind of take about that time frame. So the cool-off period never really impacts us that much.
I haven't had it impact any of my cases yet.
Right, because it ends up taking a little bit more time than you probably anticipate. So it's actually speaks a lot to probably what happened behind closed doors for them to enter a judgment before that 6-month period was, or I should say file a judgment before that 6-month period.
It reminds me a little bit of, and this is a divorce from 2022, Giselle and Tom Brady.
Oh, yeah.
They filed their judgment, I think it was the same day as the petition.
That's shocking how quickly they were able to. There must have been conversation before anything was filed.
I think they did everything before, because there had been so much speculation, and I think if they had filed for divorce and then tried to work it out, that speculation, that media, all that noise would become louder and potentially derail this more seamless process.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really interesting that they filed, and if not the same day, very soon after, filed a judgment.
Now that you're saying that, I vaguely remember reading that or seeing that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't follow that very closely, but
it was also filed in Florida, I believe, so maybe there's different rules there, but let's pretend it's California.
Right, and that, absolutely. I'm going to butcher the name of these parties, so forgive me now.
You're going to
Kyle Richards and, does anybody want to help me out here?
Mauricio Umansky.
Okay, look, right, Brooke, got it.
I've had my education in housewives.
They have not divorced yet, but they are currently separated and apparently living under the same roof. Mm-hmm. But as I think many of us have seen, he's on Dancing with the Stars right now, and allegedly he's maybe dating his co-star. I don't know. I'm not following, again, very closely.
Okay, I am following closely because it is one of the main storylines on the current season of Beverly
is it
Hills.
Currently on The Housewives?
Yes.
I got to get caught up.
So they haven't on the show announced their intent to separate.
I see.
But
you can see it in the scenes? Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, and have you seen that there are allegations that she is dating this woman, Morgan Wade.
I did, and they got tattoos together.
Got tattoos. That just happened on the show. They got more, I think, later.
So what? Okay, sideline. So on this show, is she just hanging out, and they're getting tattoos together, and they're still under the same roof, and then it's not like
the women are talking about it.
The
women are finding it odd.
The housewives are gossiping.
Yes, but that is what happens, I guess. She's saying, this is my good friend. They're definitely playing it up publicly, I think. Morgan released a song, and the music video was all about Kyle and her and them being neighbors. And
they're neighbors.
Well, not in real life, but in the music video.
I see.
I believe there's a little kiss. So they're really playing into
the media
narrative. Yes.
Fun fact: I almost had a cameo on the Real Housewives of Orange County because I live in Orange County. I don't know if I should be announcing that on our podcast.
Come see Tori.
Orange County is pretty big. And we had a client who was a Real Housewife for a matter when I was working in Orange County at a firm, and they filmed and the whole thing. But no, they didn't put me on the show.
Real missed opportunity.
Such a missed opportunity.
I think I know which housewife it is, and I'm going to tell you, downhill ever since.
Oh, really?
You weren't shown.
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah, that was a mistake on their part. Yeah. But you could still call if you wanted to.
Come on. We'll enter real quick.
Reese Witherspoon, and I think her ex-husband is Jim Toth.
I think you're right.
Am I saying that right? Another one that just kind of quietly, they announced the separation and quietly divorced.
I had completely forgot that was this year.
Yeah, and they were married for some time, 12 years. So again, a long-term marriage. I don't know a lot of details. There was no details released. No. They were very private and quiet. It's really interesting to see, just from a viewer perspective, who intakes pop culture and also as an attorney, right? Like which divorces get so much media attention and are really highly reported about, and then which divorces that I feel like have the facts to be highly reported about per se, like a long-term marriage, spousal support. I feel like has done a lot in her career in these last 12 years. But there's no reportings, and I think a lot of that does probably speak to the attorneys who represent these individuals and then the individuals themselves.
I completely agree, because I'm a bit cynical, and I think if we're hearing a lot about a divorce or separation, one party at least wants it to be heard.
Yes.
There's only so much that the media can do without inside sources or comments from the individuals themselves.
Absolutely.
So,
and speaking of divorces that we've heard a lot about, Joe Jonas and Sophia Turner.
Yes.
Sophie.
Ooh,
sorry, guys.
Sophie
I
Turner.
think Games of Thrones fans are going to be upset with me.
Just call her the Queen of the North. You're
Sophie
fine.
Turner. I actually was not a big Game of Thrones
I wasn't
person,
either.
So.
But I will do that thing where I watch it in like 5 years, way past the date that everyone was into it.
And then you're obsessed with it and nobody else is anymore?
I'm doing that right now with Survivor, which is still on, but I'm watching old seasons, and I am just telling everyone about Survivor. Like I am telling them about a new show.
Such a good show. I remember as a child watching Survivor with my parents, and like that was a Thursday night thing.
I'm going to do it starting next season, but I am such a goofball being like, guys, they really know what they're doing on Survivor. Like they got this down. It's like
those challenges.
It's in its 42nd season. Of course, they know what they're doing.
Do they have the same host?
Yes, and he's fantastic. I see why he's been on it so long. Everything is
yet to
perfect.
Be replaced. So yeah, Joe Jonas and Sophie Turner. They have had a very public separation, and of course their situation is very nuanced because she's from the UK. And again, fact check me because I don't follow these people very closely. But
I know
she's from
this
the UK.
case pretty well. Yeah,
they live in New York. They have several rental properties.
Well, it's even worse than that.
Right?
He filed in Florida, saying they lived in Florida, and she came out very strongly saying,
"No,
I think UK is the right jurisdiction, but I know Florida is not."
I saw some of the pleadings. I saw there was a screenshot somewhere circulating of all these different places they lived in the last couple of years, and it was quite a few different places. And I believe there was rumors that they had just recently purchased a home in the UK. Mm-hmm. The intention was to raise the children there.
She said that they had moved there in December 2022.
Okay.
With the intention of making the UK the forever home. They found a home, I think, in April 2022. We're getting it, set up. Her filing, I read the entire thing, was very well done. It was filed in New York. I believe it was in a federal court because she's making basically
jurisdiction claims,
right, under the Hague Convention. And I thought it was very well done. It was very clear. I think
I saw this, like, that's, I think, what the screenshots were, was her moving papers, her pleadings,
Something interesting, I think a lot of times you think of a lawyer and you think, well, they know all the special words to use, and they can write these great sentences, and it is true.
It is true. We're so
intelligent. So great. We're so fantastic. But what I actually think makes a good lawyer or a good legal writing, a better lawyer and a better brief is something that is clear and understandable. You know, you have to use certain terms, but you don't need to write these flowy sentences. When I was interning, one of our former attorneys, Debbie Soleimani, who's fantastic, she was helping me, and she would make me rewrite things often.
More simple,
She's like, make this one sentence. This is, make this one line. And it was hugely helpful. And I think Sophie Turner's attorneys subscribe to that school of thought.
I think that's very true. I love that you bring that up, because I think as we improve as attorneys, there's this misconception that the bigger the word, the more challenging the word, the better. But that's not true. You want to make it clear for the readers, and usually the reader is a judge, but still,
Well, and think about how
clear, concise, get to the point. And I agree.
And it's not that a judge couldn't understand these big words. It's that the judge is reading a lot of things.
Yes.
So make it simple. Don't make it difficult for them. You know, you don't need them to. This is obviously hyperbole. This is obviously hyperbole, but you don't need to like put metaphors in there and make the judge think
Jump
and annotate
and
find the meaning like you did in English class. Just simple, clear the facts, your argument.
Yes, and you're right. I did see a little portion. I didn't read the whole thing like you did, but I did see that. And I don't know what the current status is of that, because they
are waiting for a court hearing. I think it's either January 2nd or January 4th, but very soon in January. For a ruling on that.
Okay, interesting. I know in the interim that they have the children in New York, and they're going to be in New York, and I think that is
well, and actually it's not just New York, because she's allowed to they can travel with the kids as they see fit right now.
But they would have to. She can't have them in extended periods, right, in the UK, or can she? I thought
it was. She can, because I remember that being put there. They came to this by agreement.
Oh, that's great.
And so I actually, when we did our last podcast on them, maybe in October, I think, I thought that they might not even have the hearing in January, because they've been able to work things out, after a very public kind of blow up. They've been able to kind of quietly work things out.
That's great.
Through agreements. So we'll see January 5th or so what happens.
That's great. Why I'm surprised by that, or I guess pleased to hear that, is I feel like that is often an issue, right? If there's someone who wants to relocate with a minor child, or that's usually heavy litigation, right? Understandably so, if we're going to be talking about a relocation, not just to a different state, but a different country, right?
I mean, we
and
have
the ramifications of that.
Upset about a move to a different county. Yeah. And I am not downplaying that at all. Anything that makes it harder to see your children, I can't imagine how difficult that would be. But
that they were able to kind of work through this more complex scenario.
Hopefully.
Right.
Maybe they were just able to come up with an agreement because they knew they had this big hearing and things would go from there. But we hope we hope they have the best luck.
Yeah, those are always complex cases, right? Yes. Like family in one place, and then adding these busy careers. Yeah,
it's a hard one.
Yeah, and then we talked on Kelsey Ballerina and Morgan Evans. You and we had a fun podcast about them.
I don't think there's been any updates, but she's now dating someone new. Seems very happy.
Yeah.
I actually re-watched our podcast recently, and we were talking about how we thought she had made the right call, kind of
conceding a
little bit, and I think we were right. Look where she's ended up. She seems much more happy. And imagine if she hadn't done that. She would be, really fighting it out. And, not as emotionally open to, finding whatever else she needs.
She, I don't know the details, but she modified a few of the songs.
Oh, I love when they do that.
It's a little bit more, I don't know the right word without being
crass.
Yeah, like a little bit more aggressive, I suppose, or a little more. I mean, it's fun to listen to. I love seeing that we did the podcast. I mean, we were talking about the EP that she did, and then now on the other side.
Seeing where she's come.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what he's up to, or else I would report. He's I suppose, much more private. So
private, yes.
I don't know what to say about that, but that's kind of a wrap up. I'm sure there was more.
Yes.
Those were some of the top celebrities that I saw throughout the year. And again, in 2024, unfortunately, we'll probably see more.
I'll see you in a year.
Just how it is.
Thank you for joining us while we talked about some of the big celebrity stories this year. We will see you next time.